Thank you for joining us on the story I'm telling myself. If you loved this episode, would you do us a big favor to help us reach a bigger audience? Simply subscribe to the Story I'm Telling Myself podcast and rate this episode and share it with a friend. Thank you for listening. It is Monday, and welcome to the story I'm telling myself. Spring is springing where I am. I don't know how it is in Vancouver, Sharon, but the buds, you can see them. The buds are starting all over the trees, and the daffodils are coming up out of the ground. And it's just a very happy Monday today. Are you having a good Monday?
Yeah, it's a good Monday. Got to spend the morning on a ledge with you and Gail and a few others, which is always lovely. And it is spring here too. The snowdrops are blooming. The daffodils
I
are
love
up.
that.
So yes.
Yeah, spring is in the air. So if you are with us live, this show is with you, not just for you. So please jump in the comments, introduce yourself, welcome, and welcome our guest Sharon today. Sharon, tell everybody who you are.
I'm Sharon Summerfield. My business is The Nourished Executive. I help leaders invest in their well-being through a holistic lens to prevent burnout. I'm very, very passionate about shifting the needle where we build communities and cultures of care where no one experiences burnout.
I love that. I love that. I love your newsletter. You give so much great stuff. So look, Sharon would like you to reach out to her on LinkedIn. If you are a LinkedIn user, that is the best way to find her. Or you can find her at nourishedexecutive.ca for Canada because she is Canadian. If you're not a LinkedIn person, that's another way that you can reach her. And I'll pop that in probably at the end of the show. But Sharon, you are here because we're going to have a conversation that is so relevant to so many workplaces. And then we named this conversation, I'm being undermined, now what? Because I think we have all faced this moment. So set the stage for us. You're going to share with us one of your stories from your life in corporate America where you face this dilemma of feeling undermined. Take it away.
Yes. I was actually working for an American engineering firm. And I was working as an executive assistant. I had project roles and organizational roles. And I'll share a little bit more about my ends. And there were a couple of managers who viewed me as having no value because I was viewed as having no technical skills. So my manager of the day and his manager went to these two individuals and said, this is the value she brings. These are the relationships she has with the clients. When she's going to work on a client project, she's not going because we decide we think she could do well there. She's actually being invited. The client wants her there. And what was really interesting is one of these managers, I was living in North Vancouver at the time, and I kept running into him and his wife in one of the malls. And so I was able to actually build a really good relationship with her, and that actually helped to shift the needle. But instead of preparing an exit strategy, and anyone who's listening, if you're in a role where you're being told, or I wasn't even being told initially, I knew something was going on. I knew these things were being said about me, but until my manager came, my new manager said, Sharon, this is what's being said. These are the conversations we're starting. No one had actually said it to my face. So anyone who's listening, if this is happening, please prepare your exit strategy and look for another place that is going to value you. So instead of me doing that, I took on an external role on doing event planning for a gala. It was one of my goals and was doing a lot of event planning in my role, but thought, you know what, this will add more value. The organization was struggling and they talked about giving back in local communities. I said, well, I bet the school would like some money. So I launched a community investment initiative off the side.
Okay. Wait, you're going too fast. Like, let's just back up the train. You're going so fast through the story and you are just like leaving this beautiful breadcrumb. But I want to make sure that we really spotlight each of those pieces of bread. So you're in this role and there is this whole discounting of you conversation that's going on that you don't know anything about. Did you suspect something, like in the back of your mind? Did you suspect that there was something amiss?
Yes.
What were some of the clues? And what was the internal story as you were spotting those clues that kept you from taking any action about those?
Um, some of it. So it was a very interesting and troubling time and stressful time. So as this is going on, I could tell by how a few of these individuals were engaging in me. And, we were, because a number of us were working in different offices. So there was a lot of communications via email. It was harder to get responses, and you just feel it. But at the same time, I was also asked by HR to take on a second executive that I was going to support, because he'd had 3 other assistants and it hadn't worked, and he liked how I worked. So on one hand, I've got this, okay, we need you to help out here because we don't know what to do. And this executive needs support. But I've got this other stuff going on. And it was like I was walking on eggshells. And as you know, for a lot of executive assistants, it's not a power position, but you have to navigate quite a few different things without being in that power position on behalf of the executive. So it was like I was in conflict a lot.
Did you ever consider just sitting down with somebody and having a direct conversation about this this story that they were perpetuating that you felt was undermining your position in the team?
I didn't know how to do that. I was so nervous and more focused on, well, I am adding value. I'm adding value to our clients.
Which got to the second thing, the gala. So instead of, so the story you told yourself was, I'm not prepared to do that. I don't know how to do that. I can't navigate that. So I'm going to double down my effort. I will prove my worth by doing even more work, right?
Yes.
And I think that is such a common place that many of us find ourselves. If I can demonstrate my competence, then you cannot discount my relevance.
Exactly.
And I think we all get caught in that, and it's a horrible trap. I mean,
It's a terrible trap.
That I have felt that in my career, and it is a horrible trap, because no matter how much competence you demonstrate, it cannot overcome this other conversation about relevance.
And even when I knew what was being said about me, I also was asked to go work on a client's project, which was great. My confidence, like it was, I would speak up on different things and would get dismissed. And so what happened by going to work on the client's project, which I thought was going to be a couple of months and turned into 3 years, I was actually given opportunities I never would have been given at the organization because of that lens of me not adding value. So what that did, it actually helped me build my confidence. I was thrown into work I'd never done before, with lots of support and a really strong manager who's an amazing professional. And that was a gift.
Yes. I share, and we have not talked about this, but I do a lot of coaching of women in these pivotal moments of their career. They find me and they come to me, and the story is always the same. And it is, somebody at work is undermining me. Somebody is discounting my value. Somebody is throwing me under the bus. Somebody is not seeing my growth. And therefore, just like you, I am doing work at this caliber and level and this volume, but I'm still being held down to this lower level of title, lower level of pay. And I'm being told that there's a gap that I need to fill between where I am right now in order to have this position and title, and all the work, all this extra work that I'm doing, it's invisible. It's like it's not even happening. It gets it doesn't get calculated into that equation whatsoever. And I know this is not just something that happens to women. I think, as we talked about on the ledge today, I think this is something that is common, that happens to marginalized populations in general in a workplace. And look, if you're with us, if you're listening and you've been there, you may or may not want to out yourself in the comments, but let us know if you are resonating with this, and what questions or what things that you chose to do in that situation to navigate that challenge, because it to me, the visual I always have in my head is somebody just standing and pounding their head on the wall, just like this. Like, I could just pound my head on this wall all day and it doesn't feel like you are going to get anywhere. And so when you accepted the opportunity to do the work from the clients, being this intermediary with the client, what was the thinking you had in saying yes to that? Were you trying to escape something? Did you think it brought a different kind of possibility? Like, where was your head when you said yes to that?
My head was, well, I'd worked on the project in the earlier stages. So it was one of the big infrastructure projects in Vancouver. And so the executive director had actually reached out to me. So in my mind at that point, because I didn't have the confidence to go to other organizations or go through an interview process. I tried. I knew I needed something different, but I just didn't have that confidence. And I was going somewhere familiar, working with people that I knew, and he was giving me an opportunity. It turned into something vastly different than I thought it was going to be. It was to go initially help the communications team. And then I ended up working with the procurement team, and the learning was unbelievable. And so I said yes, because I loved working with this man. And then to find out who else I was going to be working with, they were dear and treasured friends who I'd known at that point for a good 5 or 6 years.
Well, and I think you said earlier, like, look, if you were in this situation, get out. But get out doesn't always mean you have to leave the organization.
Right.
Sometimes get out means you got to find one of these good managers that sees and understands and recognizes talent. Because there are people that just have bias, because we all have bias. But they are unaware of their bias, and they are seeing everything, including you, through the lens of their bias, which is going to be very hard for you to overcome. Again, you can show all the competence in the world, and it's not going to overcome that bias. Now, building relationship can sometimes overcome that bias, but it is hard to want to have relationship with somebody that you feel like devalues and underappreciates you.
Because I think what happens is, I think we will then armor up, and then we go and we're speaking in ways, using language that they want to hear, and that might not necessarily be my truth. And for me, going to work on the project, it was almost like the pendulum had to swing way too far. I had to recognize I had way too much on my plate. And for me, that was by taking more on. I had my project role. I'm leading a community investment initiative. I've taken on an external project role to lead an event. And then I'd signed up for a program with the Women's Executive Networking Program that's in Canada and Ireland. And I think it's in the US now. And I remember walking into the first day, and the ladies around the table, what do you do? Well, I'm an executive assistant. They're like, you rock. And it was just like, okay, I feel seen, I feel appreciated. And then I did a values exercise. It was the last assignment as part of the mentorship program. And I realized my values were in disconnect. And that became almost this piece that the dominoes had gone too far. And I'd read this article. There's a fellow who used to have a coaching business in Burnaby in BC, Canada. His name is Brian Fraser. It's called Jazz Think, and he compares everything to jazz and leadership. It's quite interesting. So he wrote this article, and it was all around creating that harmony in the work that you're part of and who you're working with. And I'll never forget the line, consider who you can best harmonize with. And that was when I made the decision. There was a number of things I stepped down from. I stepped down from my marketing role. I stepped down from a couple of volunteer appointments with the Burnaby Board of Trade, and then extended my hours in the project office, only was working with the executive that I'd worked with and still leading the community investment initiative off the side of my desk. But instead of saying yes to everyone else, I was starting to say yes to myself.
That's so very powerful. I want to share my own story that's very similar, in that I worked inside of a very toxic human resource organization. And when I say toxic, I mean at the VP level, there was sibling rivalry fighting going on among those VPs constantly. And it just cascaded down to us underneath of them. And of course, then everybody in the rest of the company is watching the chaos go on. And it's so, it was really hard to feel legitimate sometimes going into the rest of the company to do work when there was so much craziness going on in our own function. But there came a moment where one of my peers that I really respected, and we were working on a project together, and he said, look, I just got to tell you, I've been told by my VP that I can't trust you guys. I can't listen to anything you have to say. Your input doesn't matter here. I need to basically do this by myself. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, don't say anything. But, he's just basically said, anybody that works for this VP, which you do, that you guys are all just, you got your own agenda and you are just always working your own agenda and you don't really care about the whole thing, and that we're not to trust anything that you guys say. And I was just floored by that, Sharon. I was just floored. And to talk about being undermined, to tell us at a peer level, we're down here director to director, trying to design and do work for parts of the business. And at that time, we were trying to bring up a whole new part of the company, a whole new line of business that hadn't existed before, which meant this person was doing salary studies, and we were trying to create roles and grade positions and all of that kind of stuff. And I am the face person for HR to that business leader, and he's basically been told by his boss, like, cut her out. I was completely undermined. And so I made an appointment with the VP, and I went and sat down with him, and I said, I'm really struggling because I remember sitting in your office interviewing with you when you hired me. And at that point, I had been there a little over 2 years. And so we had a long conversation about HR and the role of HR in the organization. And I thought we were aligned. One of the reasons I wanted to come here is I thought we had shared vision for what we wanted to do, where this organization was going, and the role that I could play in that. So help me understand how we got from being so aligned that you said yes to now you're telling your team that I'm not trustworthy and that my word means nothing. And I sort of got the back pedal. I didn't get the apology. I didn't get any ownership. I didn't get anything. And that was really, that was the tolling bell. That was the moment that I didn't get there myself. It took my husband to get me there. But when he finally was like, it's time for you to leave, I knew he was right, because what you're saying, values. I went and had a values conversation. Are we aligned by values? And do you trust that we are still aligned by values? And while I walked away feeling like I got the cold fish handshake.
Yeah. I bet.
And
I bet you did.
that was just not enough. That was just not enough for all that I was giving up. At that point, my daughter was like 2 years of age. So all of this time that I am taking away from being her mother and being home with her and doing things with her that I was giving to this company, it was not enough.
And never mind the physical time at work that you're giving this company. It's the amount of time and energy you are thinking and talking about this
Yes.
when you are not at work.
Yes, it takes up a lot of the mental capacity in us for sure. Yes, you are 100% right about that. And so when I walked away, I felt good about walking away. I knew it was not the place and not the company for me. I was disappointed about that because I wanted it to be all those things. But that was just such a clear. I mean, there were so many other signals along the way too. I mean, it was not this one and only thing, but that was just sort of like that was like the toll bell started ringing. That was number 3, and the toll bell just started ringing, and it was just like, this is not my place anymore. This is not right for me. And I think if you have that feeling, you do have to trust it. I mean, I have another friend who in that same time frame, she left HR and moved into the business. So she took a position in the business and started working in the line business and loved it and thrived and did really well. I mean, that would have been potentially an option as well for me. But so it's not always that you have to leave, but that was when I knew like what I wanted to do around positioning human resources as this engine of innovation inside of organizations was something I was really passionate about. And I was not going to do it at that company.
Right.
And so, it was just a matter of stepping away and finding the next right thing for me. And so, but yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of ways to answer that call, but it is such a self-perpetuating problem because in my mind at that time, I mean, I was proud of myself for having the courage to go have the conversation. And I was sort of a disruptor anyway. I was just at that point, I was just not buying into any of the stuff that didn't look right to me. And I just had that, I'm going to stand on my values. There's this line in Hamilton that I absolutely love where Hamilton says to Aaron Burr, if people don't know what you stand for, then you stand for nothing.
Exactly.
And I definitely felt that way inside of this organization, like that I had to stand up. I like that whole Hamilton thing could just be me in that moment of like inside of that organization. So much of that story arc was exactly how I felt about I was going to take my shot and I was going to try to do things differently. And I was going to try to move the needle inside of the organization until I just didn't have it in me to do anymore. But the story I kept telling myself was, if not me, who? If not now, when? Right? Like, somebody's got to sort of do the battling of some of this stuff. And it took me a while to realize that I was pushing against a wall that I was not going to be able to move. And I think it's so hard to change those stories that we have.
It is. And one of the things that, I worked on quite a bit, when I realized the values disconnect and I started stepping back and getting really, really crystal clear on what I was going to say yes to, I had to learn to step away from the idea that I'm doing my best, but what if that's not good enough? Well, what more can we ask of ourselves or anyone else than to bring our best to all we're doing? So I had to start working on reframing that. And just before my project role was coming to an end, I knew I was going to be getting laid off. I knew I would be laid off. It didn't matter about all the other things because they weren't billable. They weren't billable client work. And so I did something for myself, and I highly recommend it. I knew I'd probably be looking at a layoff at the end of March. And this was in 2014. The beginning of February, I booked myself a flight to Hawaii. All I wanted to do was walk along the beach. And so I went to Kanapali in Maui. And whenever I go away, I love to read. And so I picked up 3 books. One was a fiction book on being elegant, and it's quite funny actually. And I picked up Harry Kramer's book on value-based leadership, and I picked up Janice Materno's book on finding the space to lead. And here I am in Hawaii. I'm walking along the beach, and I get caught in my head again about making the lists in my head. Well, I get hit by a wave several times so hard that I get pulled out into the ocean, and that lovely feeling of sand in the bathing suit and all that kind of stuff. But what it was such a really good reminder was, here I am in beautiful Hawaii, walking along the beach, and I'm still stuck in work mode. And I'm reading a book on a walking meditation. And if that isn't going to be striking it home closer, focus. So I had to learn to get out of my head and focus on my feet. I had to, or if there was something I couldn't get out of my head while I was walking along the beach, pick up a rock, attach that thought to that rock, and throw it in the water.
Yeah. I love that. Throw it in the water, like just release it.
Yes.
Right. So it was symbolic. It's sort of like when Melissa Robinson Hussein was with us, and she was talking about the positive triggers. You were using those rocks as your positive triggers to remind you to just stop. Like work is not here with you right now. Just keep getting rid of it.
Yeah.
Because it's such a subconscious thing. I'm going to guess that you probably have some value around accountability or dependability or reliability or something.
I do.
Integrity in yours, right? And as many of us high achieving individuals do, we have something in that sort of cluster, and it makes it difficult for us to disconnect.
Yeah, it's challenging, and the idea of always making things happen.
Yes.
And sometimes we're not meant to make things happen. Sometimes things have to swirl. And that was another big lesson I learned was, just because I've been asked to do something, sometimes I need to wait for the swirl to happen and then decide on the best action.
Ooh, say that again. That is so good.
So sometimes you have to, even if you're asked to do something, sometimes it has to go around in circles for a bit and slow down before you take the needed steps. And
you don't have to jump into action, right? Sometimes it's the pause thing that Gary just talked about. Like sometimes the most important thing that you can do is actually take a breath and just see what settles before you jump into the middle of something. It's so easy to become so addicted to fixing things.
And that's hard. It's hard to step back from that. But sometimes I wonder if that's my big learning from the accident, with the injury from 2018, is a lot of things that I can't do now. So it takes me longer to do something, but sometimes I'm not the right person to do it. Sometimes I need to ask for help to do that. And that has been like learning to flex a new muscle.
So when I found out that, but that this VP was not just undermining me, but basically undermining my entire department, and in our intra-department collaboration, like you can't make this stuff up. It's so crazy how toxic things can be in a workplace. It's just insane. One of the stories that I told myself is If I choose to stay silent, I'm choosing to be a victim.
Interesting.
And I was not going to be a victim in that organization. I was not. And that was what gave me courage. And I was not confrontational when I sat down with him. I very much was reaching across the aisle, trying to reestablish relationship. Like, help me understand what happened here, because I thought we were on the same page. I thought we shared a vision. I thought we were in alignment about how HR happens inside of an organization. How do we get to this place? What happened? And of course, I didn't get an answer because I don't think it was about me. I think he was mad at my VP. And whatever he felt about her, again, just sort of trickled all the way through the organization. But it was powerful to give myself permission to say, look, I can stay silent and be a victim, or I can at least go advocate for myself. And so I chose the latter. So many times we choose to not say anything and feel like the victim. And then we choose to walk away because we have this strong victim story. But we also have that doubt niggling in the back of our head about, did I really do everything I could have done to make this right? Or we spend a lot of time telling our victim story to a lot of other people to get them on board to reaffirm to us that our self-righteous indignation is on spot about this. Did you find yourself talking to other people about what you were experiencing during this time? And did you find that to be constructive for you, or did you find that to be more of a limitation to your ability?
I think in some ways it actually was a limitation, because the powers that be, those who have been put in new managerial roles, they didn't want to do anything about it. And HR actually didn't want to do anything about it. There were people who were leaving the organization in exit interviews actually saying, how long does Sharon have to put up with this? This is what's going on. I've overheard these conversations. She's trying to invest and rebuild these relationships. And there are issues. These issues exist. And so it was, that kind of helped me feel like I wasn't losing my mind completely. There were some other unfortunate bullying activities that were going on. And I got more vocal about it. But when this is where it gets really challenging, and it's really good that Bonnie Locraman and Jen Fraser are really speaking up. So, and as you are as well, Rita, in the ways that we can show up positive, is that how are we, if there is bullying that is going on, the people that are standing by and not saying anything, they have a responsibility. And so for me, actually, I started to speak up. But after a while, when it really wasn't making a difference, and my manager, who'd been a huge advocate for me, left, and I'd been moved to the project at that point, mostly, eventually turned into 5 days a week. It was only supposed to be 4 days a week. I kind of got separate from it. So it's just like, I might see this going on. I really got more careful about choosing my battles. I never like seeing someone treated poorly, but maybe I can help support them in a different way than totally calling out what is, or finding a different way to raise awareness to support the people that are going through this, to navigate and find a new way. Like, for example, there was a receptionist, and it was a real challenging role for her. There was, she is white and Canadian, and the people she reported to were Filipino. They would gather around her desk and talk their native language. as a way to exclude her. And so she was given an opportunity. She was in sales. I found out she was in sales, so was doing a lot of business development. So tried to involve her in our meetings to help boost her confidence as well. Wasn't supported by her manager, but found a way to make it so she could be part of those meetings. Someone she'd worked with previously reached out to her and said, I've got a role here. Are you interested? And so she's like, I'm really torn. There's benefits, I'll get paid if I stay a little longer. I said, but what about you? What do you want? And like normalizing this conversation around what does an ideal role look for you? How can you thrive? And so she ended up taking the role, and she thrived. She was back to herself again. So I would love to see us normalize, start looking at when we're in difficult situations. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees, but who's that trusted person you can reach out to and start thinking about what does an ideal role look like? Am I working within my values? Can I actually create boundaries in alignment with our values and purpose? If I can't do that, how can I show up in this role or this organization and not compromise my well-being?
I love that. Yes. And the other thing is, look, when you see bullying going on, because being undermined is a version of bullying.
Yep.
Sometimes it's micro and sometimes it's really in your face, but it is a version of bullying. So, I mean, there were some wonderful tips that you gave there. One is, if you see something, say something, right? Like you can come alongside somebody and offer support in the moment. You can do that offline for them. And what you said was, I found ways to create a space of belonging. And we all have that opportunity to extend the grace of belonging to other people around us when we see them being undermined, when we see them being unappreciated and discounted. We can still reach out and offer some level, even if you just invite them for coffee or lunch, and you don't have to sit and bitch about the company. Like, don't give the company any more of your time and space, but just offer that belonging of, hey, we work for the same company. Hey, we are professionals. Wherever you can find that space of belonging, that doesn't have to be about what the problem is.
Right. And I also think the belonging piece is really, really important, because if we're always complaining, it actually takes a lot of energy away from ourselves to
preach,
yeah, to actually take action. And then it's the energy it's taking away. You might not be part of that conversation afterwards, but how do you feel? And while I was there, talking about belonging, there were a number of people that started coming up to me like, do you have a couple minutes? And I've always made time for people. Like if you want to talk or there's something you need to bounce off me, I will always make myself available. And I've had people in a number of roles say to me, you always make time. I said, because you're coming to me, I know it must be something where you need to talk to someone. So I'm going to create that space for you and listen.
I love it. Yes. Well, look, we're running out of time because Sharon and I love to talk, and but I think there's some really good stuff here that I hope that you will take away. One is you're not stuck. So whether it's inside of that organization or somewhere else, you can find a place where your values are. So do the value check. And if your values are not being honored, that's a signal. That's the bat signal in the air. It's time to be changing positions. Two is, if you are watching this happen to somebody else, you can offer them support and belonging. You can come alongside of them and give them that bit of humanity that they need, because their humanity is being undercut by this aggressive behavior that they are receiving from others. So you may not be able to stop that, but you can offer them the alternative. And that's a power that all of us, we can all use that power anytime, any place. So I hope you will take those things away from this episode of the story I'm telling myself. Sharon, it's always a delight to be in conversation with you. I know we could go on so much longer, but we have to pick a stopping point. So I'm going to call it here and now. I'm gonna say it is time to stop. Any final words or thoughts that you want to share with our listeners?
I also think if you start to notice that some of your colleagues have some behavior changes, that, check in with them. How are they doing? Because, in many ways, we don't really know what's going on in someone's life. So create that space to reach out, to check in. Are you okay? How can I help? And find those ways to say yes to yourself. And because we can't keep saying yes to everybody else at the cost of ourselves. Find those ways that you can nourish your well-being so you can be your best self.
I love it. Yes. Yes, indeed. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Up on Wednesday, I have Misha Saffron is going to be with me. She's going to share her story about dealing with debilitating pain and how it left her feeling like she was a wilting flower in her own life. That's going to be 3:00 Eastern time on Wednesday. You're going to want to join this conversation with us. Make sure that you add it to your calendar. We'll see you then. And until then, have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us on the story I'm telling myself. If you loved this episode, would you do us a big favor to help us reach a bigger audience? Simply subscribe to the Story I'm Telling Myself podcast and rate this episode and share it with a friend. Thank you for listening.